Have you ever felt like anxiety has wrapped its fingers around your chest so tightly that even breathing feels like a monumental task? Like your mind is a runaway train, careening through worst-case scenarios while you desperately search for the emergency brake. If you're nodding right now, know this: you're not alone. And more importantly, there's a 2,500-year-old Buddhist teaching that can transform your relationship with anxiety forever. Not by fighting it, not by suppressing it, but by understanding one simple, profound truth that changes everything. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover isn't just another breathing technique or temporary fix. This is about fundamentally shifting how you see anxiety itself. Part 1: The Ancient Story That Changes Everything. The Buddha and the Poisoned Arrow. Once, a monk approached the Buddha with countless questions about the universe, eternity, and the nature of existence. His mind was tormented by these unanswered mysteries, creating waves of anxiety that crashed against his peace day and night. The Buddha, with infinite compassion in his eyes, told him a parable. Imagine, the Buddha said, a poisoned arrow strikes a man. His friends and family rush to find a physician to remove it. But the wounded man declares, "Wait. I will not have this arrow removed until I know who shot it, what his caste was, whether he was tall or short, what kind of bow was used, what type of feather was on the arrow. What would happen to this man?" The monk replied quietly, "He would die, blessed one." "Exactly," the Buddha responded. "And so it is with anxiety. While you're demanding to know why you feel this way, where it came from, who's to blame, what might happen tomorrow or next year, the arrow of suffering remains lodged in your heart." The Buddha then leaned forward and shared the teaching that would echo through millennia: the anxious thought is not you. The worried feeling is not you. They are passing phenomena, like clouds across an infinite sky. You are the sky itself, vast, unchanging, and always clear above the storms. This ancient wisdom holds a key that modern psychology is only now beginning to fully understand. But before we unlock that door, let me share a story from our time, perhaps one that mirrors your own experience. Part 2: When Modern Life Becomes a Pressure Cooker. Sarah's story, the executive who had everything except peace. Sarah was what everyone would call successful. At 45, she was a senior marketing executive, owned a beautiful home, had 2 wonderful teenagers, and a loving partner. From the outside, her life looked like an Instagram dream. But at 3 a.m., Sarah would find herself wide awake, her heart racing like she'd just run a marathon. Her mind would spiral through an endless list. What if I lose my job in the next restructuring? What if my kids don't get into good colleges? What if my mother's health deteriorates? What if? The anxiety had started small, just occasional worry about deadlines. But over the years, it had grown like kudzu, wrapping around every aspect of her life. She tried everything: therapy apps, yoga classes, even medication. They helped temporarily, but the anxiety always returned, sometimes stronger than before. One evening, exhausted and desperate, Sarah attended a Buddhist meditation center near her office. She wasn't particularly spiritual, she just needed something, anything, to quiet the storm in her mind. The teacher, an elderly woman with eyes that sparkled with an inner peace Sarah desperately craved, said something that stopped Sarah in her tracks. "You keep trying to solve anxiety like it's a problem to be fixed. But what if anxiety isn't your enemy? What if it's a messenger, carrying wisdom you need to hear. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time, someone wasn't telling her to just relax or stop worrying so much. The teacher continued, "In Buddhism, we have a phrase, 'This is not mine, this is not me, this is not who I am.' Every time an anxious thought arises, meet it with these words. Not to push it away, but to recognize its true nature, temporary, impersonal, and ultimately, powerless to define you." Part 3: Understanding Anxiety Through the Buddhist Lens. The signpost, not the destination. Here's what most of us get wrong about anxiety. We think it's a character flaw, a weakness, something broken within us that needs fixing. We wage war against it, creating what Buddhists call the second arrow, suffering about our suffering. But Buddhist philosophy offers a radically different perspective. Anxiety isn't your enemy, it's a signpost. It's pointing you towards something that needs attention, something that matters deeply to you. Think about it. Do you get anxious about things you don't care about? No. Anxiety arises when something you value feels threatened. Your family's well-being, your sense of purpose, your need for security and belonging. This is why, as we age and life naturally becomes quieter, anxiety often seems to intensify. We have more time to sit with our thoughts, fewer distractions from the business of building careers and raising young children. The stillness that should bring peace instead becomes a stage where all our fears perform their endless show. But here's the transformative insight: recognizing anxiety as a teacher doesn't mean we have to enjoy the lesson. It means we can stop adding resistance to the experience. Part 4: The Twin Roots of Suffering. Attachment and aversion, the push and pull of anxiety. The Buddha identified two primary roots of all suffering, including anxiety, attachment, raga, and aversion, dosa. Attachment whispers in your ear, "Hold on tight. Don't let go. If you lose this person, this job, this identity, you'll be nothing." It's the white-knuckled grip on everything we believe keeps us safe and happy. Sarah's 3 a.m. terrors. They were attached, screaming about potentially losing what she'd worked so hard to build. Aversion takes a different approach: push it away. Avoid the pain, the uncertainty, the possibility of loss at all costs. It's the frantic energy that has us scrolling through our phones to avoid sitting with uncomfortable feelings or lying awake strategizing how to prevent every possible future catastrophe. Together, they create a perfect storm of anxiety. We're simultaneously clinging to what we have while pushing away what we fear. We're trying to freeze the river of life, to stop change in its tracks. But here's what the Buddha understood: everything changes. Anicca, impermanence, is the only constant. Your body changes. Your relationships evolve. Your thoughts and feelings flow like water. Even your anxiety itself is constantly shifting, though it might not feel that way when you're in its grip. The moment we truly accept this, not just intellectually, but in our bones, something miraculous happens. The grip loosens. The resistance softens. And in that space, peace becomes possible. If you're finding value in this perspective, please take a moment to subscribe to Buddha Coha. We're building a community of souls seeking peace in these turbulent times, and your presence matters. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of Buddhist wisdom for modern life. Part 5: The Liberation Practice. Now we arrive at the heart of the transformation, the actual practice that can shift your relationship with anxiety forever. In Buddhist meditation, there's a technique called mental noting or labeling. It's beautifully simple, yet profound in its effects. When an anxious thought arises, instead of becoming the thought, you observe it and gently note, thinking. But we can take this deeper with the phrase the teacher shared with Sarah: "This is not mine, this is not me, this is not who I am." Let's break this down. This is not mine. The anxious thought doesn't belong to you. It arose from causes and conditions, perhaps fatigue, perhaps a triggering event, perhaps old patterns carved into your neural pathways. But it's not your possession. You didn't choose it, and you don't have to own it. This is not me. You are not your anxiety. Just as you are not your hair color or your job title, you are not the temporary mental state moving through your awareness. Can you sense the liberation in that recognition? This is not who I am, your essential nature, what Buddhists call your Buddha nature, remains untouched by anxiety. Like the sky remains blue above the storm clouds, your true self remains peaceful beneath the turbulence of anxious thoughts. Sarah began practicing this phrase every time anxiety arose. At first, it felt mechanical, like she was just reciting words. But gradually, something shifted. She began to experience what Buddhists call non-identification, the ability to observe her thoughts without becoming them. It was like stepping out of a tornado and realizing I could watch it spin without being swept away, she later described. Part 6: Mindfulness as your anchor. Here's something fascinating about anxiety: it cannot exist in the present moment. Think about it. Anxiety is always about the future, what might happen, or the past, what we regret or wish had been different. When you're fully present, feeling your feet on the ground, aware of your breath moving in and out, sensing the temperature of the air on your skin, where is the anxiety? This is why mindfulness is so powerful. It's not about emptying your mind or achieving some special state. It's about coming home to where you actually are, right now. The Buddha taught a simple practice called satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. 1. Mindfulness of body, feeling your physical sensations without judgment. 2. Mindfulness of feelings, noticing pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feelings as they arise. 3. Mindfulness of mind, observing the state of your mind, restless, calm, worried, peaceful. 4. Mindfulness of mental objects, watching thoughts and emotions arise and pass. But practice this. Right now, as you listen to this, take a moment. Feel your breath. Don't control it, feel it. Notice where you feel it most: your nostrils, your chest, your belly. This simple return to breath is always available. It's your anchor in the storm, your refuge when anxiety tries to sweep you away. Sarah discovered that she could practice this anywhere. In board meetings, when her heart started racing. In traffic, when her mind began its what-if spiral. Even in those 3 a.m. wake-ups, she would place her hand on her heart and simply breathe, whispering, "I am here. This is now. I am safe in this moment." Part 7: The Radical Act of Self-Compassion. Befriending yourself when it matters most. There's a voice that often accompanies anxiety, the inner critic. It says things like, "You're so weak. Why can't you just get it together? Everyone else manages fine. What's wrong with you?" This voice adds suffering to suffering, creating what Buddhist teacher Tara Brach calls the trance of unworthiness. But Buddhist teachings offer a radical alternative, metta, loving kindness, directed first toward yourself. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." Think about how you'd comfort a dear friend struggling with anxiety. Would you tell them they're weak? That they should just get over it? Of course not. You'd likely say something like, "This is really hard. I'm here for you. You're going to get through this." Why do we deny ourselves the same compassion? Sarah learned a self-compassion practice that transformed her relationship with anxiety. When anxiety arose, she would place her hand on her heart and say, "This is a moment of suffering," acknowledging the pain. Suffering is part of being human, recognizing our common humanity. May I be kind to myself in this moment, offering self-compassion. At first, it felt awkward, even silly. But over time, this practice began to soften the harsh edges of her anxiety. Instead of anxiety plus self-criticism, she experienced anxiety held in compassion. And remarkably, when we stop fighting our feelings and instead hold them with kindness, they often begin to dissolve on their own. Part 8, the deeper teaching on identity. Who are you beyond the anxiety? This brings us to perhaps the most profound Buddhist teaching about anxiety, the question of identity itself. Who are you? Are you your thoughts? Your feelings? Your body? Your roles and responsibilities? The Buddha's answer was revolutionary. What you think of as self is actually a collection of ever-changing processes, not a fixed entity. He called this anatta or non-self. This might sound abstract, but it has profound practical implications for anxiety. When you say, "I am anxious," you're identifying with the anxiety, making it part of your core identity. But what if you could shift to, "Anxiety is arising in my awareness"? Do you feel the difference? The first statement makes you and anxiety the same. The second recognizes anxiety as a temporary visitor in the vast space of your consciousness. Sarah had a breakthrough moment with this teaching during a particularly intense anxiety episode. Her daughter was learning to drive, and every time the teenager took the car, Sarah's mind would spin horrible scenarios. One afternoon, as the familiar panic began to rise, Sarah sat quietly and asked herself, "Who is aware of this anxiety?" And in that moment, she touched something profound, the awareness itself, which was completely peaceful, simply observing the anxiety like watching a movie. She realized, "I'm not the anxiety. I'm the awareness that's aware of the anxiety." This shift from being I in the storm to being the space that holds the storm changed everything. Part 9, Integration and Daily Practice. Making these teachings real in your life. Understanding these concepts intellectually is one thing. Integrating them into your daily life when anxiety strikes is another. Here's how to make these teachings practical. Morning intention setting. Before you check your phone or leap into your day, take 3 conscious breaths. Set an intention. Today, when anxiety arises, I will meet it with awareness and compassion. The RAIN practice. Buddhist teacher Tara Brach developed this acronym for working with difficult emotions. Recognize what's happening. Allow the experience to be there. Investigate with kindness. Natural awareness, not identifying with the experience. Evening reflection. Before sleep, reflect. What triggered anxiety today? How did I meet it? What did it teach me? No judgment, just gentle curiosity. Sarah developed her own ritual. She kept a small notebook where she wrote one thing each day that anxiety had taught her. Sometimes it was, "I learned I care deeply about my children's safety." Other times, "I discovered I can feel afraid and still act with courage." This reframing, from anxiety as enemy to anxiety as teacher, transformed her entire experience. Part 10: The Community of Support. You don't walk this path alone. The Buddha emphasized the importance of Sangha, spiritual community. We're not meant to face our struggles in isolation. Sarah found that sharing her journey with others at the meditation center created a powerful shift. She discovered she wasn't alone in her 3 a.m. worries. The successful businessman in the group struggled with health anxiety. The young teacher battled social anxiety. The retired nurse dealt with existential anxiety about aging and death. There was profound healing in this shared humanity. As Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron says, compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. This is why we've created the Buddha Coha community. If this message is resonating with you, please subscribe and join our growing family of souls supporting each other on this journey. Share this video with someone who might need to hear these words. Your single share could be the lifeline someone needs today. Part 11: When Anxiety Returns. The Spiral Path of Healing. Here's something important. Using these Buddhist practices doesn't mean anxiety will never return. Sarah still has anxious moments. The difference is her relationship with them. Buddhist philosophy teaches that healing happens in spirals, not straight lines. You might find yourself facing the same anxiety you thought you'd conquered. But each time you meet it from a slightly different place, with more awareness, more compassion, more skillful means. Sarah describes it beautifully. I used to think healing meant never feeling anxious again. Now I understand healing means anxiety can arise, and I don't lose myself in it. I can feel it, acknowledge it, learn from it, and let it pass. I've stopped trying to build a life without waves. Instead, I've learned to surf. There's a Buddhist teaching about this. The obstacle is the path. Your anxiety isn't blocking your spiritual journey, it is your spiritual journey. Every moment of anxiety is an opportunity to practice presence, compassion, and the recognition of your true nature. Part 12: Advanced Practices for Deep Transformation. Going Deeper, the Medicine of Emptiness. For those ready to go deeper, Buddhism offers the teaching of sunyata or emptiness. This doesn't mean nothingness, it means that all phenomena, including anxiety, are empty of independent, permanent existence. Your anxiety doesn't exist in isolation. It arises from countless causes and conditions: your genetics, your past experiences, your current circumstances, even what you ate for breakfast. Understanding this interconnectedness can bring profound relief. You're not broken or weak for experiencing anxiety. You're a human being responding to the complex web of life. Sarah found this teaching particularly liberating when dealing with inherited anxiety patterns. Her mother had been anxious, her grandmother too. Instead of seeing this as a curse, she began to see it as part of the vast web of cause and effect, stretching back through generations. I realized I could be the one to transform this pattern, she said. Not just for me, but for my children and their children. My healing ripples outward. Part 13: The Ultimate Freedom. Beyond Anxiety, Touching Your Buddha Nature. The ultimate Buddhist teaching about anxiety, about all suffering, is this: you already have within you everything you need for peace. Your Buddha nature, your essential enlightened nature, is already present, just temporarily obscured by clouds of thought and feeling. The Zen master Suzuki Roshi put it perfectly: you are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement. This isn't about becoming someone different. It's about uncovering who you've always been beneath the layers of worry and fear. Sarah's most profound moment came during a meditation retreat. She was sitting in silence when, suddenly, anxiety about her mother's health arose intensely. But instead of her usual reaction, she found herself simply observing it with complete equanimity. In that moment, she touched what Buddhists call nirvana, not some otherworldly state, but the simple peace of non-resistance, non-identification, complete acceptance of what is. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, she recalls, but in those seconds, I knew beyond doubt that peace is always available. Not because life becomes perfect, but because we can touch that part of us that was never anxious to begin with. Your journey begins now. As we conclude this exploration, let's return to where we started, to you, who are listening to this because anxiety is your unwanted companion. The Buddha's final words were, "Work out your salvation with diligence." Notice he didn't say, "Work out your salvation with stress, or with perfectionism, or with harsh self-criticism." He said with diligence, steady, patient, compassionate effort. Your anxiety doesn't define you. It doesn't own you. And most importantly, it doesn't have to control your life. The practices we've explored, recognizing thoughts as just thoughts, anchoring in the present moment, offering yourself compassion, understanding the impermanent nature of all things, these aren't just techniques. They're invitations to a fundamentally different way of being in the world. Sarah's transformation didn't happen overnight. It took practice, patience, and yes, sometimes she fell back into old patterns. But she kept returning to the practices, kept meeting her anxiety with awareness instead of resistance. Today, 3 years after that first meditation class, Sarah still experiences anxiety sometimes. But she also experiences something else, a deep, abiding peace that exists alongside whatever arises. She's learned the truth of the Buddhist saying, "Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional." The Buddha's timeless words for you. Let me leave you with words from the Buddha himself, from the Dhammapada: "All things arise and pass away. But the awakened awake forever." In the end, only 3 things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. The mind is everything. What you think you become. And perhaps most relevant to our exploration today, nothing can harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. But remember, guarding your thoughts doesn't mean suppressing them. It means meeting them with awareness, wisdom, and compassion. Your next step on the path. If this message has touched something within you, if you feel the stirring of recognition, yes, this is what I've been searching for, then your journey is already beginning. Start small. The next time anxiety arises, before you do anything else, take one conscious breath. Just one. And in that breath, whisper to yourself, "This is not mine, this is not me, this is not who I am." Notice what happens. Notice if there's even a moment of space, a flash of peace. That's your Buddha nature peeking through the clouds. Please subscribe to Buddha Coha if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Your engagement helps us reach more souls seeking peace in these challenging times. And remember, you're not walking this path alone. Every person who's ever felt anxiety and found their way to peace is walking with you. The Buddha himself is walking with you. And this entire community is here, supporting your journey. May you be free from anxiety. May you be at peace. May you recognize your true nature, vast and unshakable like the sky. May you meet each moment with presence and compassion. And may you remember, always, that peace is not something you need to find, it's something you need to uncover within yourself, where it has always been waiting. The anxiety you feel is not your enemy. It's your teacher, your messenger, your invitation to awakening. Listen to its message. Thank you for your concern. And then, with infinite gentleness, let it go. You are not your anxiety. You are the awareness that observes it. You are the space in which it arises and passes. You are already free. Remember this truth, and let it transform your life. In peace and presence, the Buddha Coha community thank you for joining us on this journey into Buddhist wisdom for modern anxiety. If this teaching has served you, please share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Subscribe to Buddha Coha for more explorations of how ancient wisdom can transform modern suffering into peace. Namaste.